Welcome back to 411 Forward. Empowering people is the goal of our next guest. She is behind a global podcast. The effort is called Giving a Voice to Depression.
She describes herself as a devoted mother, a good friend, and someone who lives with depression. I call her a former co-worker and a good friend as well. Terry McGuire, thank you very much for coming here. How did you come up with this idea to giving depression a voice?
It's not probably the answer you're expecting, but it just was by giving myself a voice. It was probably the first time I didn't even realize that I did not speak about it until I mentioned to a few friends and my own mother that I was experiencing depression, not for the first time, and they all said, "What? You're funny. You never seem to be depressed." And I thought, because when I am, you don't see me. But as I started to speak about it, as your previous guests have just said, everybody I talked to said either, "Oh, I have that same experience," or "My aunt does, my uncle does, my partner, my mother, my child." And I just started realizing how much of a need there was to talk, and then of course to hear as well. So I'm asking people to join this conversation, whether or not they're ready to share their own story. That's not even necessary. You can very anonymously and privately listen, and you'll just realize, A, you're not alone, B, it's real. And then if you don't understand it, you're gonna understand. This is a behind the curtains, really raw, honest, these people who are talking with us and sharing us and trusting us with their story are being real about it. There's no speech.
But Terry, what do you think is the stigma for us all, either not to express that I am depressed or to say, "Hey Terry, is there something wrong? Are you depressed?" What's the stigma behind depression?
I think the stigma is being afraid that you'll be judged as weak, as unreliable, as flawed, broken. I don't want to hire you because what if you get all depressed and you don't show up? Well, I've done every job I've ever been hired to do, and I did it, I think, fairly well. I think that the question that you ask someone, it's not because of stigma. I think people are afraid to have that discussion because they don't really want to hear it. They want to hear fine when they ask, "How are you?"
Oh, right.
And then if you did say something, what do they do with that? They don't know what to do with that information and don't know, do you press the panic button if someone says, I'm really, just can't get out of this funk? Or do you say, "Yeah, we all," which is what most people do.
Deflect.
"Yeah, we all have that. Oh, yeah. Or what do you have to be depressed about? You have this great life."
So let's talk about the podcast. You also launched the GoFundMe site to get some funding for this. We have a little bit of a clip of you talking about this. Let's listen in.
According to both the World Health Organization and the National Institute for Mental Health, 350 million people worldwide suffer from depression.
The number is
staggering,
enormous.
What have you found through this podcast?
Well, the point I made next in that video was that sometimes a number that's staggering and overwhelming completely
yeah, we look at the big number, not at the individual.
At each one,
Yes.
Make 350 million hash marks.
Yes.
And that's a person who's, again, your mother, your child, and it's real. And when that number is who has it, who's affected by it, that's not even close. You can't tell me if your child's depressed, it doesn't affect you. It affects you.
Can I ask, because depression is one of the core reasons that many people decide to take their lives. You as a fighter saying, "Yes, I have suffered with depression," what is it that helps you day to day to not go to the extreme?
I think the honest answer to that, which is interesting to put out on television, the voices, and it's not.
Ooh, there's so many voices in our head, right?
But it's the record that plays. When you are in that dark place, it's just you don't want to go to battle with your own brain. It knows every chink in your armor. It knows your every vulnerability. And when it starts saying all those things, I have never been convinced that the people I love, and that includes my children, of course, would be better off without me. I know people who have been convinced that that is true, and we have lost some of those people, even in my own family, and I have come close to that. My sister, who is my co-host on this, shared that recently she was suicidal, going on a new antidepressant, and that's the Bridget Prescription Warning podcast. It's scary. It's really scary. I have never gone there. I have never been suicidal, but it's not because I'm stronger or because I have a more developed sense of responsibility. It's because it just isn't that bad for me, and I am eternally grateful for that.
How can people participate in the podcast?
Well, they can listen. It's on iTunes.
But others have left their own stories as well. I mean, you're hearing stories from people around.
Oh, it's the same as your previous guest. You know, when they said, once you start to talk, I thought it was going to be pulling teeth. And when my sister and I first started talking about this, we were like, is anybody going to want to say it? You know, and we made it easy by keeping it audio only and no video and using first names and not really saying where you are. And people are like, you can use my name. You can say where I am. You know, give them my address if you want. Have them call. You know, they were just, they're coming out of the woodwork. I have more interviews than I could use in a year.
Giving Voice to Depression.
And the website's givingvoicetodepression.com.
Thank you.
Terry, thank you.
Thank you.
Coming